Cool. Hi. Thanks, everyone. Super appreciate you letting me come hang out with you. And look, I'm excited and grateful to chat with you about a little malware ExtravaScamza, if I may. Thought it would be fun with the title there, and I hope it's okay to walk around with the handheld. No one has yelled at me yet, so we're good with that. Cool. Hey, I'll admit I would hope to tell you, hopefully, a fun story. I'll admit I don't think I have a ton to answer for things like attribution or a lot more of the aftermath of what I'd like to show you, but I still hope we have a little bit of fun and get a little bit nerdy. So I will cruise through the stupid obligatory credibility slide, and I'll make fun of it the most that I can. But look, hey, coming from the Coast Guard Academy is where I kind of got my feet wet with cybersecurity stuff. Bounced over to the Department of Defense with their Cyber Training Academy over at TC3, and then some time with the Defense Threat Reduction Agency as a red team operator there. But now found my home over at Huntress, and I really love it there. It's super fulfilling, a lot of great work. But some folks might be more familiar with a lot of my online activities with cheesy YouTube videos or content in education and cybersecurity awareness, stuff like that. I'm very grateful. I'm very fortunate and blessed to have found some success in building that out. So grateful for all the support. But I will dive into our malware ExtravaScamza, and let me say I don't have any sweet alert from an EDR product or solution. I don't have any cool, fancy tracking threat actor, cybercrime, or collecting campaign cluster stuff. It's just an email that someone had sent along to me, and that's the small, simple stuff. I guess maybe a blessing and a curse of some of that online activity. People just email me weird things on the internet. But this individual says, and hopefully it's somewhat readable here, like, hey, John, I was scrolling my FB feed, presumably Facebook, and I got some Linux commands there trying to download and execute a bash script. Started to analyze it, but it's pretty obfuscated. Thought you would want to take a look. And I thought, okay, maybe this will cool. This will make for some video, this will make for some content, this could be something to explore and pick apart. And if folks actually opened up the screenshot, the attachment that's included, some of you might already be raising your eyebrows because it's kind of weird, right? You've got a curl command at the very end of this post, anyway, article telling, oh, use Python to steal browser data of anybody, which is odd. But this individual says, hey, here's a command, package install curl, tac y, pkg, curl with the capital L, O, S. I'm not sure if folks tend to just know those parameters of their arguments right off the top of their head, but what looks like a bit.ly link to termux cmd, and they run that with bash. So, strange string of numbers at the very end there, not quite positive what that might be, maybe a Unix timestamp, perhaps? But if we actually wanted to take a look, if we wanted to investigate, we could go see what the heck is that bit.ly link. Now bear in mind, I thought, oh, this will be a cutesy little video, this could be content, so I had a stupid screenshot of me just talking to myself in a computer over on the bottom right. But look, thought we'd play with this. We've got curl, we can pull that down to download from the bit.ly link, but we didn't include any of those arguments, because that capital O would put it to some output, that little S would just, hey, make it silent, and the capital L would follow the redirect. But we didn't really want to follow the redirect. As we're exploring it, we wanted to see what it would do. And it is a redirect, ultimately. Brings us to a GitHub page. So no surprise to anyone. Over at raw GitHub user content, and a user GainHoney7378. And that should be offline now. That should be dead. Thank goodness. Fingers crossed. Someone, if anyone's willing to spot check me. But that brings us to the repository termux command. And the termux command, that if you actually were to go retrieve that file, it looks like this. Which is a whole lot of noise and nonsense, right? You got a bash shebang line at the very start, nothing fancy there. And then weird syntax at the start. Probably just checking, do we have xxd, one of the hex command line utilities, inside of a which command substitution just to make sure we have it installed, test conditions around that with square braces. If we don't, we install vim for some reason, but presumably maybe just to grab the dependency, xxd, if we didn't have it before. And then all this nonsense of z something is set to something else over and over and over again, but that was the file that was pulled from the GitHub repository. That's not all of the GitHub repository. It's worth taking a look at. What else are they hiding there? What's up with that GainHoney7378 user? Turns out this file, though, is kind of massive, right? I had word wrap at least kind of funneling the rest of that syntax for the previous slide, but that could go on if you horizontal scrolled for quite a long time. But that might be something else in the repository for us to dig into. There is, and this is some time ago, I'll admit, hey, a couple years, I think it was 2022 when we got to dig into this, but there's another file in there that would be curious what it is and what this whole termux command strange repository is. If you take a look, it's a picture. That looks a little silly. You can see the commands that at least we saw on that Facebook post, the curl command, running it with bash, and you've got some like dumb, silly, kitty hacker menu, where at least on Facebook, right, so to speak, you've got options to, hack an account, or clone an account. Maybe get a free 1,000 followers or some silly shenanigans that really aren't all that important and just kind of a cutesy kiddo thing, I'm thinking. But that's what's presented as you were to run this code, presumably. At the very least, we can kind of keep that in the back of our mind. Is, something strange, something odd, maybe cutesy, hacker, get free followers, or hack an account. But if we actually ripped apart some of that bash syntax, kind of dumb, kind of simple, just regular deobfuscation, well, we can split up a lot of those lines, like the Z variables being set, that are just separated by semicolons. So we can make those all new lines, and now we've expanded out that long giant string to about 19,000 lines of more variable setting strings. But if we take a closer look as to how often are any of those variables even used, is that important for the piece of code that we're looking at? Turns out no, so we could remove all the Z strange strings, no matter what their values are, they're never used later in the code, so we can just cut those out. If we remove all those strange variable declarations, we can see what's actually important. Some of the smart stuff that might build up a later payload, another layer, another stage in whatever attack chain we're unraveling here. Now you can see a couple of it way down at the bottom. Obviously it's building out a couple variables that it might use to represent a character or a part of a command or further payload that it will use, hence the Z00I, Z00T, etc., etc. Does some strange stuff to grab the date, and we might see that again further, especially if we were remembering that, Unix timestamp looking thing at the strange Facebook end. But at the very, very end, we can see some oddball stuff, and maybe some of you have already caught your eye on an eval statement. I hope the light isn't too bad to look at the syntax here. But if we take apart that eval statement, the very top, and this is a little bit messy, forgive me, I don't know how well you can read that, but at the very top there is an rm tacrf to make sure we can get rid of this script and any of the interpreters that might be working with there. Strange giant bundle of base 64, date commands it looks like, and then more pieces. But let me try to extract each individual spot here so it's not super duper overwhelming. They've got that giant string of variables called zztest. That never ends up being referenced later on in the rest of the code. So we could probably ignore that if we'd really like to, for the moment. But down below, they do something strange where they curl speed hetzner 10gb.bin, another thing that isn't really later used. So I'd like to, if I may, probably pick your brain. I don't know if any of you are thinking, what are they doing pulling down a 10 gigabyte file from a speed test that looks like nothing? There was no real other actual data in there. I guess this is another provider to just host something. I don't know if that's to add a delay. I'm curious what you might think. But there was still more to unravel. The last section there, I know it's a little bit tiny, apologies, but that runs new code. That carves out another snippet or another payload that it saved into a date variable, just tracking the date. And I'm curious if that was just, a trigger to say this has already been ran before, or maybe we leave an artifact to say we've infected this host previously, blah, blah, blah. The gist is, though, if we cut up all of the values that it would have been extracting previously, then it could very well evaluate a whole new layer, have something new to cut up. And that brings us to this. That brings us to another snippet where we start to see some of the breadcrumbs that we already saw in that repository. Some variables being set, like bash escape sequences to add color. Okay, again, that cutesy green on black hacker Hollywood movie thing, or other colors. And then some of the options that we saw in just that simple menu display from our picture in the GitHub repository. The stupid stuff, hack someone's account, clone their account, get a free 1,000 followers, blah, blah, blah. Couple definitions of groups with strange numbers attached to the end of it that they just shuffle and work with. You can see the XXD command used frequently at the top. Okay, so starting to see what the real kind of component and core of this code would be. At least seeing and identifying those strings. We saw those before. We must be in the right place looking at the root of this thing. If we were to keep scrolling down, though, we see the exact same message that we saw in the Facebook comment, which is a little bit peculiar. Again, that bold command syntax, pkg install, blah, blah, blah. And then it just spits out the menu. You can see the echo statements down below. So like shell script sort of thing, bash syntax with a fake hack Facebook account sort of gimmick to it. Sounds cutesy, sounds dumb. But we see a couple strange things, again, with the groups, and then if you were to actually interact with it, if you were to actually, choose one of those options from the menu, what do you think it does? Well, of course, you need credentials to interact with this Facebook account, to get your free followers or to hack someone else. So they have some simple little premise here. Hey, you must be logged in to use this tool. Log in with your credentials. Please enter maybe a fake or extra account, one way or the other. I don't know, that could be part of its ruse. But it'll genuinely ask you for your username and your password, and then take that input, for one thing. Question is, what will it do next with it? And if it's building out this application capability to be something with Facebook, I think this starts to be kind of funny. It interacts with Facebook via curl, right? Facebook mobile client, just entirely in the Linux shell scripting language in bash. Disgusting to look at, and a little bit funny though. But you get to see, it's checking the Facebook server with other output and messages that it says, also trying to make sure it can grab your IP address with IPIFI, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Gross cut commands, gross kind of, syntax or HTML carving out of genuinely, literally interacting with Facebook mobile in bash. But if we kept cutting this up, if we kept scrolling down, we might be able to see some more of the weird oddities that come with this. It'll actually, after it has genuinely logged you in with your credentials, gotten your session, gotten your token, it'll start to cut it up. It'll start to extract out and carve out the cookie value, so it has your identity, and whether your credentials may or may not be changed in the future, okay, maybe there's still some session we can hold on to. And then we start to see more of the nefarious aspect of this shell script that was just seemingly found on a weird Facebook comment. And that starts to kind of pull this thing further and further and further. But we know that it's grabbing cookies, we know that it's asking for credentials, so what else will it do? Obviously, dumb, we probably could have very well expected. Nothing fancy here, no special tricks, just slapping it up on pastebin or paste.ee or any equivalent, right? There are tons and tons of those different paste sites, and that's nothing fancy, right? But obviously, kind of cutesy, again, bash script, Facebook mobile client, sort of a scam for what folks might just tend to be seeing online or copying and pasting if any poor innocent victim might. You might notice some interesting strings there, though, if you are able to take a gander or dig into some of the syntax. But if we actually took a closer look, especially with the groups we saw previously, that variable with what looked like numbers wrapped in a string, this is kind of wild to me. They use the access that you've given, the username and password, the actual authentication you've just logged in with, grabbing the cookie, doing exfiltrating that out to a paste site, and then they loop through everything that was in that big long groups array, that big list we saw earlier, and posts the exact same message that we saw created as a string, that command bit.ly, copy paste this syntax. Okay, cutesy, neat. Again, now just kind of proliferating through your access into other groups that it might be able to have access to. And I'd be curious what more are those groups. We can play with those in a little bit. But, okay, at least proliferating in a different way. And then, if we were to keep cruising through this, we see some strange sort of syntax or like forward slashes and file system representation like a /SD card, which isn't normally a location on Linux. But if we start to put a couple of these puzzle pieces or breadcrumbs together, we're thinking, maybe this could very well be like a mobile device, right? maybe a phone, maybe a cell phone, maybe Android, I don't know. But it loops through and collects pictures from your SD card. Sketchy, odd, strange, but it will compress those, get them into a tar archive, try to upload those to any other location, like free.keep.sh. Maybe some folks are familiar with that, just hosting a lot of the material. Any files you might like. And then, now that it's gotten everything that it very well could have with your username, with your password, with your cookies, with your IP address, your session, and now the link to stolen and just captured SD card pictures, it puts this to secretm.me. Odd domain. I'm not sure if folks are familiar with that one or not. But if you were ever curious, for whatever reason, what secretm.me was, congratulations, it's this. The strangest, funniest looking thing for secret messages, where you can anonymously send messages to your friends and coworkers and fans. Goofy. 2023, maybe this is updated for 2024 at this point. But if we were to tinker with this, just for our own exploration, just try to understand a little bit more of what the heck this sample or this thing is doing, we could try to create our own little account here. So I enter my name, we enter a user, and it just randomly generates a user ID, though. So there's at least some account information that we didn't specify. I didn't enter my username, it just prompted me for a name, probably, I don't know, for whatever reason to communicate with coworkers, the cutesy dumb send anonymous message gimmick. But you might have noticed something kind of funny there. We saw a similar thing when we did get to see in the syntax some of the code as to how it would post to or actually put stuff up on the secretm.me site. So, maybe we've got a little bit of a lead as to what this adversary or whatever person, threat actor, could very well be doing in this malware scam strange thing. We've got a name, or at least the ID, that could represent that account, where it's just funneling a bunch of its stuff. And the PIN, or the password, so to speak, was numbers. Now at this point I'm thinking, okay, and I'm sure you could probably put some puzzle pieces together here. We will not speak aloud of what could be done, but it very well could be done, right? What's to stop us from trying to track down what that PIN code could very well have been, if it's just 6 digits? At this point, I realize I should probably stop recording, so the camera could probably turn off, but it could very well bring us to one number, one combination, one input that would log in and see where the threat actor adversary was just dumping everything that it's seen from all these scams and malware samples. So eyes closed, right? Emoji symbol there, but we could see all the secret messages that have been dumped in Secret Messages 2023 for our malware scam here. And you might be able to see, I know there are a couple redactions at the bottom as it scrolls through a couple of the messages, but there's that freekeep.sh URL that we saw. There are the dates as to when that was compromised, the user, the password, the IP address, the credential link on pasty, blah, 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 blah. And there are a lot of these. I may very well have sent, forgive me, some profanity at them back just for fun, but if you could see the red little notice here at one of the left-hand side screenshots, this would scroll forever and ever and ever and ever. So what all is there? We have an idea, right? We've got the thoughts to it, but is there more that could be uncovered now looking back at the entire history of this thing running? In a strange, silly, secret messages all online with the cutesy colors and the dumb pictures. But yeah, there's a lot. And if we were to pull it down, I think we saw about 3,000 entries in there over the years. And I've redacted obviously as much as I could. Forgive me, I know this probably looks like a horrible slide to make sense of, but you can see the pasty snippets, what would be an IP, the segment that would be a credential, cookie values, and their strange new exfiltrated tar archives dating back to probably December of 2021. And I will say, hey, got to dig into this in 2022, maybe start of 2023, and we've uncovered something weird here that's malware campaign, sort of scam, sort of taking effect and victimizing whatever users on Facebook in a strange scenario. and that keep.sh, I don't know if this is just strange curiosity, but like, oh, are any of those still real? Are they actual? Are they valid? Do we see the uploads and the SD card pictures that could totally have just come from any poor person's phone? I will say yes, those are things, and I at least wanted to make sure and confirm some of that. Okay, yes, that is exactly what we're dealing with, and we'll leave those redacted and obscured. Hey, we peaked at 1, and now we don't need to do that again. But odd, totally real, espionage, blackmail, extortion. I don't know. What do we think? Stalkerware, spyware. AI training material was suggested. You know, I think you might be right. These are one of the compromised accounts. As to whether or not it is compromised and now used to do more strange stuff, this Facebook profile obviously looks very weird. I don't know if that's that individual actually, or maybe someone else doing a little bit more with that account over and over and over again. All to say, what we've seen now for those numbers were the group IDs of different Facebook groups where it would spam and add new and create another instance of that campaign, or the affected IDs for the users. If you saw that in all the secret messages.me different colored boxes, the IDs would refer to those users on Facebook. The groups themselves were interesting because they were literally groups to discuss a whole lot of, learning hacking, learning cybersecurity, education materials, trying to get smarter, or just using tools like Termux, which if folks weren't tracking, is that app or one of the Android applications you could very well download on your phone to get a terminal, to get a command line little instance here. And I have a hunch, I don't think I'm going too far out on a ledge here. I think this could very well be somewhat pseudo-targeting some of the groups that maybe are in a location where they don't easily have access to a computer, like a laptop, but they may very well have a phone. Some countries that might just have a little bit more access to that, and they will likely be the ones hanging in those Facebook groups or spending more time on their phone to learn hacking or security or computer things. Now, this was weird because I'm in a strange scenario where, like, I'd like to report and try to communicate or get this in front of someone who can make a difference and can try to fix this, where it's not like a vulnerability. I haven't found some exploit in Facebook or anything by any means. I just see some weird stuff that seemed to have a lot of potential impact in victims. So I tried to scream and shout over on the interwebs, looking at Twitter/X, and big shout out, big thanks to John, who had responded. He said, hey, you can hit me up. And I just wanted, if I may, to walk you through a little bit of that disclosure process, and not to say disclosure, because I don't think that's the right word, but communication. Because how do we try to tell someone and have someone else be able to fix? We're like, I'm not over at Facebook myself, and what might they be able to bring to light? So I reach out. We have this communication, just DMs over in Twitter. I had the stumbling block where I'm like, wait a second, Facebook versus Meta, now it's a bigger thing. I don't know what pocket this tends to fall into. John helps me navigate that. And it's interesting where they start to discuss, well, you could report this as a bug or bounty, like a white hat bug bounty thing, to be compensated for it. And I was like, I don't need that. I don't want It's not a bug or a malware exploit in my mind. They say this might be eligible for a bounty. I have no real interest. I just wanted to bring it to someone who could make it better and change and fix this. I don't particularly consider it in the bug bounty world. Eventually, we really was left off at that. Hey, just submit this thing online, and then hopefully, potentially, someday, maybe someone will take a look at it. There wasn't a whole lot more that came from that, even in the group message with some of those other folks. I will say, though, I got an email at some point. A big shout out to the individual, I think their manager or engineering manager, one of the director ends of it, that for working with malware discovery on their platform, on Facebook. They say, hey, I got your name through an internal chat talking about this strange campaign, and would love to chat. So no secrets here. There's not a whole lot going on. I didn't think this was anything super duper special, but I did want to at least make sure, again, folks were aware. Got in a call with them and tried to walk them through everything that I have just shown you. And again, this is some time ago, so I feel good being able to tell the story now. But I think they were kind of leaning in the same thing as like, oh, it's not malware, it's not mobile malware, mobile hacking scam, because it's, again, just bash, but would run on your phone in that strange sort of scenario of all the impact of Termux. And I tried to show them that. I tried to let them know, like, look, I don't know if folks are tracking or familiar, but this is something that, again, is just going to be in your pocket, and any individual copying those commands, maybe in that population, would roll through. They, I think, made sense of it and were able to do whatever they did. It's really hard to say or hard to know exactly what could have changes come from it, other than I know the GitHub repository got taken down. I know that GitHub user's gone. I'm not positive about any of the other winding roads that we found on the way through. But it still felt kind of good. Okay, cool. We found something neat, found something that is worthy us, hey, getting a crew together to dig into. And I don't know if folks have, again, we're familiar with Termux, but that was, I think, the biggest breadcrumb to this is like, ooh, even the initial commands to run or copy and paste in that scheme was something that those, maybe in a different geography, maybe in a different world here, could be thinking, oh, I want to learn more security, and I would fall for that on Facebook. Silly, strange thing, but I thought, some implications from that, even in a different world that we don't normally think of, but is that, oh, spyware, stalkerware, ripping up a whole lot of those SD card pictures? I'm curious what you tend to think, but I thought there were a couple breadcrumbs in there that were interesting and worthwhile. Propagating to different groups, hey, grabbing that access in a couple different Dumbo paste sites, and using maybe not one would think of as a command and control or external infrastructure, a dumb, stupid, anonymous messages or secret messages online. But all in all, I hope that was at least a fun story, something neat and something interesting that you don't tend to see every day, or at least aren't familiar or tracking. But thanks so much for listening. Hope that was cool.